I'll open this one up. It should be in our Lesson 1 folder in the Part 2 on our drive. Let's take a look at this one, Stick Dude. Okay, we got a nice, simple little stick figure that we can work with. And I've set this up so that we've broken out the major body parts into their own layers so we could manipulate them pretty easily. And what I wanted to do is practice making some keyframes and making changes to the different body parts as we go and assemble an animation forward like this. This is a great example of just trying out this, what we might call frame-by-frame animation, where we're literally going in and changing the artwork and taking a snapshot of each incremental change we want our character to do as we go through the animation sequence. So to get things started, what I'll do is I will just make another set of keyframes that we can use to start changing our stick figure. And we'll get a feel for making those keyframes and making the changes on those snapshots. I'll leave a little space in between just for visualization so we won't have anything packed so tightly together. And we can always move these keyframes later. But I'll just go ahead and select all of column 5 here, because I'm going to change pretty much every element. And I'll use my F6 to insert keyframes. And we should have a new snapshot of each of our Stickman body parts that we can make modifications to. Now, if I was going to try to make this guy walk, there's a few simple things that we can take into account. I'm not going to worry about his upper body for right now, so I'm just going to copy that one and move it forward. But if his foot is planted on the ground at the beginning of this step, I know I can leave that in its spot, and I'm just going to make changes to the back leg to be able to pull him up and advance him towards that next step. So I'll take frame 5 and make those quick changes to it. I think I can just select both of the arms and the body and just move them forward so that he's kind of sitting right over top of his foot here. And with that change, I should be able to go in and reattach his legs and bend those joints so that he kind of looks like he's standing on them instead of those broken leg type of look. His front leg should probably be reattached, and it'll be somewhere around here mid-step. So I'll just bend his knee in. See, we'll pull that on up and stretch his foot out. You can see working with the endpoints of these line segments is kind of easy for being able to make quick modifications and not lose the structure. I'll work forward and I'll make another frame where his leg's passing across and ready to make its next step. You can see that we're just going to do the same thing. I'm going to select all of these elements in here. I'll choose F6 to insert my keyframes, and I've got a new copy of all of these different graphics that I can make my modifications to. I'll move his body forward again, kind of put him up on that next step. Now at this point, I think his leg should carry forward. He should probably be planting this foot down for its next step, so we're going to extend it out, and we'll just pull his foot into place. Now I've got these two legs separated into layers just so we won't have to worry about any crossing issues. But if that kicks in for you, you can just undo and try your drag a different way. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to collapse his foot in on that end of the leg point so I can very easily grab this forward. And we don't need his toes at this point, but he should kind of have his foot pointing ready to be placed down. And this leg should be stepping up. Now this foot hasn't left the floor yet because this one hasn't hit the ground. So we can kind of see in our sequence exactly how this should go. And I'll do one more like this. So we'll just add one more set of keyframes and make some more changes. Now you can see this is pretty loose, and as I start picking his foot up, I might even start losing track of where the next element needs to be. So I wanted to go over adding a few references in here as we make our snapshot changes and build our animations forward. One thing that I could use is the guides that we had before. Remember, those are up in the rulers command. We can use these for snapping. I might even just use them for visualization. We won't be able to see them in the final movie, so we can put them wherever we'd like. If I drop a guide down for the ground line, we can use that to make sure we know where the ground is as we start bouncing these things out. Let me set up my last keyframe here where we're going to move his body forward once again, grab those sections here. Now one thing I might point out as I move the element forward, I'm very simply going in and grabbing the layers, which is selecting the objects in the layer just like it did before. Now it's a little bit confusing because you can see all these keyframes selected, but in the normal operating mode of the program, I'm only going to be manipulating the keyframe that my playhead is sitting on. So once again, we've got something else we're going to look at, that playhead telling us where we are in the movie, and we want to be aware of that so we can make all of our changes and we can drop some of these elements in. And I think I've got to move it a little bit too far forward because he's got to plant that foot right about here and stand on it. Okay, so let's see if we can set that back leg up. I'm going to set his foot on the ground. I'm just going to carry it along that line. And of course, we'll put his toes down there with it so he's planted it down there. I'll set his leg up. Go ahead and drop to the back, and we'll get rid of those chicken ostrich legs. So he's putting his weight on it there, and he should be picking this leg up at this point. Now, we can do what animators always do when they're going through a sequence like this. Oops, didn't want to move that guy. Let me put that back down. And that is, if you're having trouble figuring out how your animation sequence should go, that's probably the point that you should stand up and start walking across the room and watch your legs. Now, I'm going to make his toes bend at this point just so we can see him picking that up. And remember, I can just do that by holding down my Alt-Option key and pulling out a corner. Remember that one from before. Oops, a little too much bend on the toes. At this point, I probably, since I've grabbed it twice, go ahead and lock that guide layer, and that way I won't grab it anymore. It'll just be our reference point for our ground point. Now I need to get rid of a little bit of werewolfishness to his ankle here. He's got kind of a long foot. But you get the idea. You can play and tweak and set these up. I'm going to set one more in here so that we can kind of come close to at least finishing off a step. I think by this point you get pretty much the idea of how we're going to be working this through, and that I've actually used each one of these keyframes to change the body parts, even if it's only just moving the top of the body along. I've got those changes recorded right in those keyframe snapshots that we've made each point. I'm going to do one more, and then we'll go back and preview what we've done. I'm going to back up and see where I don't have any change there, but there you can start to see that walking animation kicking in. I need to have him pick his foot up, start to place it, and if I was going to complete at least one step, I'd probably use maybe 2 more keyframes for that to be able to fill those out. So let's see, let's finish this one up. I need to have him move a little bit forward again. I'm going to have him center himself up on that leg, so we're not going to move too much. Once again, I'll straighten that out. A little bit of bend in his knee. He's going to pick this leg up and kind of finish off that step. And I'm just stretching these pieces out. Once again, I don't need his toes anymore, so I could probably snap those 2 together, and then I only have 1 point to work about. And let me carry through one more for the front step there, and then we'll take a look. Okay, we'll just move those 3 parts a little forward again. He's going to swing his knee forward here and start to look at anticipating placing that next step. All right. Now, we can preview that like before. We can scrub along the timeline. We can kind of see that walking motion going in here. And there's a couple of things that we can talk about just in animating stuff. You want to add a lot of character animations and try not to make them so mechanical looking. A lot of times when we're doing this, though, we can't properly preview the new location of the element without really looking back at the last location of the element. And you might notice that some of these are a little bit uneven, like I have him stepping not quite so much and a little bit more all of a sudden. So the technique I'd like to look at now is, how can I get a little bit more information as I'm working forward in this cycle, building up all of my snapshot frames? And we're going to do that through a feature called onion skinning.